Hi, everyone. Okay, so today let's continue our discussion of this iyun tefillah of the siddur. So if you don't have a siddur yet, you can please take an art scroll siddur, either the black or the tan. They're the same. There you go. Because we were.
And that could get a few.
Okay, so we're in the middle of the section. The reason why we're doing iyun tefillah, for those who haven't been here yet, is because we're in the section in the Kuzari where Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is talking about the value that prayer, and specifically brachot, blessings, brings to the life of a Jew. It helps you be completely mentally aware of the experience of the moment in which you're living. And this is all part of his discussion of how a pious or saintly person behaves. He lives in the moment. He's completely self-aware. And the truth of the matter is that tefillah in general is really an exercise of not only self-awareness, but really of awareness of the world around us, the awareness of our relationship with God and all that God does for us in life. Now, when a person appreciates everything that he or she has in life, that gives you a sense of great joy, of wow, look how much I have. Look at all of the blessings that I have in life. And so he launched into a discussion of the blessings of the Keriat Shema. And it's important to note that the Torah mandates that a man should recite Keriat Shema twice daily, b'shochabecha uvekumecha, when you lie down and when you awaken. And so our rabbis understand that to mean that there are certain times in which a person must recite Keriat Shema. The time of lying down is after nightfall. The time of awakening is within the first 3 hours after sunrise of the day. So that's why, depending upon the time of year, you may have noticed that there are sometimes signs that you've seen. Or in the bulletin it says, Sof Siman Keriat Shema, the last time you can recite the Shema. That's because, depending upon the time of year, sunrise and sunset, or dawn and nightfall are at all different times, and the span of daylight is at different times. And so it's an intricate calculation, but it's not for now. But the point is that like we're right now in the time in the beginning of June, where Sof Siman Keriat Shema, the last time you can recite the Shema in the morning, is actually quite early. Well, it depends if you're in university or not. In university, it's really early because, it's like 9:20 something. So sometimes, our kids, sometimes the older guys too, like to go to a late minyan, and they miss Zman Keriat Shema, and so they can no longer fulfill the biblical commandment of reciting the Shema. Now, the reason why I said men have this mitzvah is because, as we all appreciate, women are exempt from time-bound positive commandments. So therefore, a woman is technically exempt from reciting Keriat Shema on a biblical basis. But there is still a rabbinic obligation for a woman to recite Keriat Shema at least once a day, so that she can accept all Malchut Shamayim. She can accept the yoke of heaven upon herself.
Any time of the day?
Any time of the day. Any time of the day. Yes.
That's the only way to accept the yoke of heaven upon us. Like, is that?
Well, it's the mandated way of doing it. I mean, but a person could accept the yoke of heaven upon themselves in a number of different ways. Yeah.
What's the point of a late minyan if they can't say Shema on time?
The point of it's a very good question. The point of it is that let's say a guy is just rolling out of bed at 9 o'clock or 9:15. He says, okay, I'll wash Nagel Wasser, I'll say my morning brachas, I'll recite Keriat Shema, and then I'll lay in bed for another hour, reading the news or something. And then I'll get to minyan when I get to minyan. So at least I fulfilled the biblical obligation of Shema. And then when I get to minyan, I'll daven the rest. So that's what actually some people do.
So the point of those minyanim is to allow those people to do that?
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so noting that the Shema is the component of prayer that is biblically mandated, at least for men, we then look at the frontal and back material that is surrounding the Kriya Shema as something that is added by the sages to create a more meaningful Kriya Shema experience. The purpose of Kriya Shema is primarily for Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, for a person to accept the yoke of heaven upon themselves, to hereby declare Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, meaning that not only do I accept God's mastery over myself, His rulership over myself, but I also accept that it is an exclusive rulership to the exclusion of any other deity or any other force in my life. Nothing else controls my life other than God. So, with that in mind, we would expect to see that the frontal material preceding the Kriya Shema, that is mandated by the sages, should be thematically related to that idea. Now, the other two paragraphs of Kriya Shema are the Haya Im Shamoa, which is an acceptance of the principle of Sachar Va'onesh, that God provides a just recompense, a just reward and punishment for our deeds. That's what V'haya Im Shamoa, that's the theme of V'haya Im Shamoa. And the third paragraph, the primary theme is Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, is the mitzvah to daily remember the exodus from Egypt. As the Torah says, L'man tizkor et yom tzeitcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. You have an obligation to remember the exodus every single day of your life. And how do we do that? We do that by reciting the third paragraph of the Shema. Because it says, in that third paragraph, Ani Hashem Elokechem, Asher Hotzeiti Etchem Me'eretz Mitzrayim Liot Lechem Le'Elokim. That's the climax for our purposes of that third paragraph. So there are some commentaries who state that since there are three blessings of the Shema, two in the front and one in the back, there's two preceding the Shema and one after the Shema, like we discussed last week, these three blessings in some way contain those three themes. The first blessing of Yotzer HaMe'orot contains the theme of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. The second bracha of Ahava Rabbah contains the theme of Sachar Va'onesh. And the third blessing contains the theme of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Now, you can certainly see how the third bracha that comes after the Shema contains the theme of Yetziat Mitzrayim. I mean, if you go to that bracha, it's certainly self-evident, because it's at least towards the end of the paragraph on page 96, it talks all about how God took us out of Egypt, Mimitzrayim ga'altanu Hashem Elokeinu, that you took us, you redeemed us from Egypt, Umibeit avadim piditanu, and you took us out of the house of slaves, Kol b'choreihem haragta, you smote all of the firstborn, Uvechorecha ga'alta, and your firstborn, your children of Israel, you redeemed, V'yamsuf bakata, and you split the sea, V'zeidim tibata, and you drowned the sinners, V'yedidim he'avarta, and the beloved ones, meaning the Jewish people, you allowed to cross through, V'yichasu mayim tzarehem echad mehem lo notar, and the waters covered up their oppressors, not one remained. Okay? So you see, thematically, this bracha contains an elaboration of Yetzias Mitzrayim, going into more graphic detail about how not only did we leave Egypt, but that the destruction of our enemies was part and parcel of that redemption, and we sort of climax that blessing right before Shemona Esrei with stating, who is like you, Hashem? That just like the Jewish people sang a song to you upon seeing their complete redemption after the splitting of the Red Sea, we now embark upon a Shira Chadasha, upon a new song to sing to you, Hashem. And this is sort of the preface to the Amidah, because we're supposed to prepare ourselves in that sense of joy, of reenacting in our minds, that sense of liberation and redemption, so that we can start Shemona Esrei with a high, with that tremendous sense of joy of what it feels to be a redeemed, chosen one of God, prepared now to serve Hashem and to feel that sense of liberation. And therefore we prepare, just like you redeemed the Jewish people, Go Aleinu Hashem Tzavakot Shemo Kadosh Yisrael. Redeem us as well. Bring us back to Eretz Yisrael. Bring the ultimate redemption. And we can envision that as well. And then we launch into the Shemona Esrei. But if we're going to say that the first two blessings before, okay, so that's the last blessing of Keriat Shema. The first two blessings of Keriat Shema, if they do indeed correspond, the first blessing corresponds to Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, and the second blessing corresponds to Sachar Va'onesh, the idea that there is reward and punishment for the fulfillment of the mitzvot in the Torah. So where do you see that? Okay, so we're going to answer that question by just looking at the language of the bracha. First of all, just on the simplest level to answer that question, it's very simple. The theme of the first blessing of Keriat Shema is a description of the entire universe that exists above our earth. The supernal, what's called the supernal beings, the celestial bodies, and the angels in heaven. And what we're doing when we say this blessing is acknowledging that all of the lofty bodies that exist are all under the control of the Ribono Shel Olam. Now, why do we need to acknowledge that? Because certainly in earlier periods of history, there were many people who would look up in heaven and would worship the heavenly bodies and say, "O sun, O moon, come to my aid." And if only these very, very large celestial bodies that are beyond our grasp must have their own kind of supernatural power, and people would try to channel those forces to their benefit. They would do this with the celestial bodies, the stars, the sun, and the moon, and they would do this with the angelic forces as well. And so part of what we acknowledge when we say this bracha and we discuss the celestial bodies and we discuss the angels in heaven is that we say that they are all in the process of serving Hashem. All of these very, very powerful and supernal beings were created by God and they serve Hashem. So it's not that there are separate entities that can control our lives. There is only one deity, and that is the Ribono Shel Olam, who controls everything. So that clearly corresponds to the first blessing of the Shema that we start with. Yes?
This reminds me of a discussion I just read in Mishpacha. I'm sure everybody read it, everyone reads Mishpacha. One lady was writing that she was at the kever of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and a Moroccan lady came in and said, "Thank you so much, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, for making a shidduch for my daughter. Now I want you to work on my son." And this lady wrote, "Isn't that beautiful?" A week later, a man wrote in and said, "This is Avodah Zarah."
Yeah.
This lady is saying thank you. She's praying to him and saying he can make this happen. So when you say how people used to, pray to the sun and the moon, things aren't so different. People just exchange the things they pray to.
Precisely. Yes, you're right. And so the theme is sort of the emphasis of what we have to remind ourselves is that no matter how much we think we can circumvent the system by going to these intermediary forces, whether it's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or some celestial body, we have to remember that ultimately it's only Hashem. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The next bracha is Ahava Rabbah, or Ahavat Olam. Wow, that's loud. Or Ahavat Olam for those who daven Nusach Sfard. So the bracha. By the way, what's the difference between Ahava Rabbah and Ahavat Olam? How many of you are Nusach Ashkenaz? Just out of curiosity.
Olam is everlasting love.
Right, so Ahava Rabbah is what we Ashkenazim say, and how many of you are Nusach Sfard? Say Ahavat Olam, right? Yeah. So there's a good mix here. The difference between the two, what is the difference? Ahava Rabbah and Ahavat Olam.
Ahava Rabbah, just a great love, and Ahava Olam, everlasting love.
Everlasting love, which is a good song, by the way. Anyway, but that's besides the point. Ahava Rabbah means an abundant love, a tremendous amount of love. Ahavat Olam means eternal love. The reason why Ashkenazim have two different versions, we say Ahava Rabbah in the morning, and we say Ahavat Olam at night. Yeah, in Mariv. And the reason is because at least one interpretation of Ahavat Olam is that you can talk about our love is eternal when you need to reinforce a love that is somewhat strained. I will love you forever, even though I'm terribly mad at you right now, right? But our love is forever. Ahava Rabbah means I have so much intense love for you right now. And so the difference between day and night is day is you are living in that, you are basking in that sunlight of recognition of the divine. And night represents a time when it is harder to discern Hashem. So it is representative of the Golus, representative of the diaspora of the periods of persecution. And this is also reflected in the entire davening in Mariv, which we won't go into today. But that's the difference between Ahava Rabbah and Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam is, we know Hashem that even though it may be dark right now, your love is eternal and you will never forsake us. And Ahava Rabbah means it's an intense love that I can feel and experience right now because I'm basking in the daylight of your love. Okay. So, as I mentioned last week, we open up this bracha. I'm sorry. Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam and Ahava Rabbah. The theme of that is the second paragraph of the Shema. Why? Because Ahava Rabbah completely shifts gears. In the first bracha of Yotzer HaMe'orot, we were talking about how all of the supernal beings worship God and model for us how we're supposed to worship God. And so therefore we say, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, and then we conclude the bracha by saying, just like these are celestial bodies that illuminate the world, may you cause a new light to illuminate the world in the future, in the Messianic age. And we finish the bracha of Baruch Atah Hashem, Yotzer HaMe'orot. Blessed are you, God, who creates the luminaries. Yes?
This is a little bit off topic, but do you know when Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard kind of diverged?
It's a very good question. It starts around the 13th or 14th century. However, that's only when we see a coalescence of those communities as separate communities, perhaps even earlier. But there's evidence to show that, and there's a lot of scholarly material about historians who have studied this over the years, that the differentiation between Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard actually started centuries before, in the period of the Gaonim, when we were still primarily in the Middle East. There were two seats of Jewish communal power in the Middle East from around the 6th century till the 10th century, for those 400 or 500 years. And that was called the Gaonic period. There was the seat of power in Eretz Yisrael and the seat of power in Bavel. So there are some scholars who say that the different minhagim that were transferred over to Europe, in different parts of Europe, Nusach Ashkenaz corresponds more to Nusach Eretz Yisrael, and Nusach Sfard corresponds more to Nusach Bavel, to the Babylonian Nusach. Doesn't always work out that way. There are many, many differences, but there are certainly some threads of connection between Eretz Yisrael and Ashkenaz and Bavel and Sfarad. Yes?
Why do some Ashkenaz shuls daven Nusach Sfard? Before we came to Bayat, we were in a congregation that daven Nusach Sfard. I know Quantum Park does, the Minsk does.
Yes,
and
right.
It took me about 6 months to figure out where I was.
Well, it was primarily the influence of the Arizal, that certain communities that were more mystically bent and Hasidish bent daven Nusach Sfard. Yeah, even in Eastern Europe, in Poland and so forth. Okay, so we finish the Yotzer HaMe'orot, and then we launch into Ahava Rabbah, which has nothing to do with the previous bracha. This bracha of Ahava Rabbah is all about the blessing of the what? Someone fill in that blank for me. What is the theme of Ahava Rabbah? Now the word love, okay, clearly we've identified. God, you have loved us with an abundant love or an eternal love. But how does that love manifest itself? What have you done for us by showing us that love? You've given us the Torah. That's exactly the point. You've given us the Torah. So we've transitioned in the first blessing from a description of, this beautiful description of the supernal beings and how they worship you. And now we transition into a discussion of how you have shown us this tremendous love by giving us your Torah. And we ask you, Hashem, it's also a supplication, we ask you, Hashem, implant within us a desire to worship you and to serve you properly to fulfill the mitzvot of the Torah. Now, do you see perhaps a connection between this paragraph and the second paragraph of Shema v'haya im shamoa? Anyone? Anyone want to suggest a connection?
Well, it talks about if we follow the Torah, if we don't follow the Torah.
Exactly. So we're asking Hashem, please give us the wherewithal and the commitment and the inspiration to always fulfill the mitzvot of the Torah, because we know that the stakes are riding on the fact that we fulfill your mitzvot. So therefore, we praise you for giving us the Torah, and at the same time, we ask you, Hashem, give us the inspiration and help us conquer our baser drives so that we are able to fulfill all of the mitzvot of the Torah. Now, so we've explained, I think, in general, all three. What I would like to show you also is that this idea of transitioning from a praise of the luminaries to a praise of the Torah is also fashioned after a paragraph in Tehillim that we say every Shabbat, at least those of us who come to shul on time, which is probably very few people. No, I shouldn't say that. Okay, turn to page 374 in the Art Scroll Siddur. Let's take a look at Psalm 19 together. Psalm 19. Lamnatseach mizmor leDavid, for the conductor, a song of David. Hashamayim misaprim kavod kel, u'ma'asei yadav magid harakia. The heavens relate the glory of God, and his handiwork is instructed by the sky. Yom liyom yabiya omer, v'layla l'layla yechavedoas. Every day there is an expression of speech or of expressing God's greatness, and from evening to evening, when we see the stars and the moon in the sky, yechavedoas, there's an expression of knowledge. Ein omer ve'ein devarim beli nishma kolam. You can't hear them, but you can see them. B'chol haaretz yatsa kavam uviktzei tevel mileihem. That in the entire world their line goes forth, and to the corners of the earth they fill. Lashemesh sam ohel bahem. That he has set up a tent for the sun. In other words, it's basically God has set up an orbit for the sun to traverse the entire sky. V'hu kichatan yotzei mechupato. He's like a bridegroom that leaves his chuppah. Yasis ki gibor lorutz orach. It's miktzei hashamayim motzo. He comes out from one corner of the heaven. Utekufotam al kitzotam, and his circuit goes to the other end. Ve'ein nistar mechamato. And there is nothing hidden from the sunlight of this tremendously powerful luminary that we call the sun. Stop. It's a hard stop in this paragraph of Tehillim. Now, immediately, there is a complete shift of gears. Toras Hashem timima, mishivas nafesh. The Torah of Hashem is pure. It restores the soul. Eidus Hashem ne'emona, machkimas pesi. The testimony of the Lord, meaning his Torah, is trustworthy. Machkimas pesi, making the fool wise. And etc., etc., etc. Now, King David, what are you doing? You started talking about the sun, and now you transition without any warning The Tehillim are supposed to be thematically logical. What is the shifting in the middle of this paragraph of Tehillim from talking about the sun and shifting and talking about the Torah? So the commentaries explain that the whole purpose of the Torah is to bring illumination to the world. That as bright as the sun is, that illuminates the sky, it's really only a metaphor for the spiritual illumination that people are supposed to experience when they are enlightened, literally enlightened, by the knowledge of Torah that God presents to the world. So the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai is really a replication on a different dimension of creation. That just like God created a world that is supposed to bring physical greatness and enlightenment to the world, the giving of the Torah is supposed to bring that same enlightenment on a creative level in a different dimension, on a higher dimension, something that only can be perceived by human beings. And so, as great as we perceive the sun to be in its illuminating power, the illuminating power of the Torah is even greater than that. And that's why David's introduction to his praise of Torah is first his praise of the physical luminary of the sun. And when we look at the blessings of Keriat Shema in that light, we can certainly understand why our sages felt that they could do the same thing in talking about the supernal beings, especially the luminaries, and then from that transition to a discussion of how great the Torah is that you have given us. It's the exact same transition as we see from Psalm 19. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that an amazing idea? Okay.
And if you look at the end of the psalm,
Yes.
it's talking about reward and punishment,
Uh-huh.
and being saved from that.
Yes, very good. Yeah, you can continue on and read, and because with the Torah, we now have the tools with which to be saved from the punishment of falling into the traps of life. Exactly, which is also thematically related to this Shema. Fantastic. Another thing I wanted to point out is that the blessing we mentioned last week, that the blessing of Yotzer Or is really a takeoff or sort of a riff on a pasuk in Isaiah that Ani Hashem, let's see, what does the pasuk say? Yotzer Or Uvorei Ra, that God forms light and creates evil. And we don't want to end off a bracha with creating evil, so we say Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorei Et HaKol, that God creates everything. It's a euphemistic way of ending the bracha on a positive note. But one of the reasons why we choose this pasuk in Isaiah as the opening bracha is because Isaiah said this blessing when he was speaking to King Koresh, King Cyrus, who was eventually going to build the second temple. What nationality was King Cyrus? Persian. What was the religion of ancient Persia? Zoroastrianism, which believes in what? In good and evil, light and dark, a duality of deities. In other words, everything is two, good, evil, dark, light. And so when we want to counteract that, what was Isaiah telling Koresh? He says, we reject the whole idea of a duality of deities. We say that God is in charge of everything. And that was the whole theme of the bracha, the whole theme of the pasuk that Isaiah was trying to instruct Koresh about our belief in the unique, singular Jewish God. And so therefore, that's why we open the bracha this way, again, thematically linked to the whole idea of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What you'll also notice in this bracha is that there is also a transitioning within this bracha itself. And that's why you'll notice that in most Sidurim, we're back on page 84 and 86 now, you'll notice that in most Sidurim, they divide this bracha into separate paragraphs. The first paragraph starts with Hameir la'aretz v'ladorim aleha. Now, by the way, I hope it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Paragraph marks did not exist in the times of Chazal. When they instituted this bracha, there were no paragraph breaks in the bracha. It was all just one text, starting from the word Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech, going all the way down to Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeorot on page 88. That is really all one paragraph because it's all one bracha. Siddur publishers, understanding that it would be difficult to read this monolithic, huge piece of text as one paragraph, broke it down into separate paragraphs. But that's a later invention from whoever published the Siddur. Okay? So the first paragraph is the first theme within this bracha, which is Hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha, that God illuminates the earth and those who dwell upon it with compassion. And how great are your creations, Hashem. You've created all of these luminaries to provide light unto the world. And not only that, but these luminaries, we are told by both ancient man and by our sages, each one of the celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, they all possess their own independent sentience. And that's what our sages, that's how our sages depict them. That's how, by the way, ancient world has always acknowledged that the celestial beings have some level of sentience. I mean, this is not some knowledge, some consciousness. This is not a primitive belief. This is what the great philosophers in Greece believed also. This was a belief that continued through the medieval period, even into the Renaissance period, that there is a sentience, that a consciousness that exists with all of the celestial beings. And in many ways, Chazal reverberate this idea in many of their writings, that every single object that God creates has its own sense of self, its own self-awareness. And therefore, we can learn from the celestial bodies, who are so powerful, yet remain obedient to the directives that Hashem gave to them. God instructed the sun, every single day you're going to rise in the east and set in the west. And our sages talk about this in Midrashic texts. They say, we can learn this sense of faithfulness in our worship from the sun. Not once has the sun deviated from its pattern. Not once has it deviated from its orbit. And therefore, we're supposed to look at the celestial bodies and say, look at the precision with which these very, very powerful bodies conform to Hashem's will. That's how we're supposed to fashion our lives. We're supposed to try and, despite the fact that we are beings of free will, and we think we can control, we're supposed to get to the point where we feel such resonance with the universe and with Hashem's creation that we are also in an orbit. And so that it's a natural course of events that every day I get up and I do the things that I'm supposed to do in the service of Hashem. And that's the modeling that we're supposed to be able to take from all of these celestial bodies. Yes?
The thing is, human beings have free will. Sun, the moon, animals, trees, they don't have will. They're objects that follow laws.
So I anticipated your question, Vivian. That's why I waited until I finished my paragraph, right? In other words, the point is that despite the fact that these beings do not have free will, our goal is to try and reach a point where my free will in these matters of obeying Hashem is eliminated. Let me ask you a question. When you drive past McDonald's, going down Bathurst, right south of Steeles, are you chalishing to pull in there and get a Big Mac?
How do you know exactly where it is?
I pass it all the time.
I guess you college to have.
I'll tell you, not that, but I did not come from a religious background, and I know exactly what I'm missing in all sorts of areas.
No.
And yes, I miss it, but I also make the choice, I'm not doing that.
But the point I'm making, here's the point I'm trying to illustrate. We have habituated our lives in certain areas to the point where we no longer have a struggle within with our free will to decide whether I'm going to do that, whether I'm not going to do that. Correct?
Yeah.
Correct? The goal that Hashem places for us by creating the celestial bodies is get to a point in life where not only is not committing murder or theft something that is outside of your purview of free will, because you've already mastered that, master all of the other things as well, so that you no longer are considered to be in a state of will I or won't I, when it comes to these things. That's the way we're supposed to model ourselves after the sun and the moon and the stars. Good? Okay. We then transition to the next paragraph, which talks about a different kind of supernal being that is not visible to the human eye. And what is that? That's the next paragraph. The publisher's next paragraph is Titbarach Tzureinu Malkeinu V'Goaleinu. Why is there a new paragraph that starts there? Can anyone tell me why? Page 86. Titbarach Tzureinu Malkeinu V'Goaleinu. Why is there a new paragraph there?
It's talking about Hashem?
No? What is it talking about?
Angels.
The angels. Okay? And now we're going to learn all about the angels. And that we'll save for next time. Okay? So now let's go. You can close your Sidurim. And let's go into the Parsha. Doesn't leave us much time, but we'll do our best.
I can look it up in the dictionary. What's the difference between supernal and supernatural?
Because supernal, the sun is not supernatural, but it's still supernal. It's meaning that it's above our planet, and it sort of describes like a superior being.